Leo says it so well. Last year, we imported more than $288 billion in Chinese goods. That number this year is expected to top $300 billion. Why should we be surprised when this kind of thing happens with this kind of trade policy? We buy products from a country that cares little about its own workers in its own environment. Why would we expect them to care about our families and to care about Leo's grandchildren? It's compounded by the fact that U.S. companies continue to pressure Chinese companies to do whatever it takes to cut costs. Paint these toys, well, the cheapest way to do it is to use lead paint. Cut corners wherever possible, well, the cheapest way to do it is cut corners. From pet food to toothpaste, from tires to toys, the newspapers and radio stations and TV stations almost every day highlight the consequences of our nation's failed trade policies. Our trade policies should prevent these problems, not invite them. Last week, as President Sherrod said, Senator Bob Casey and I introduced the Imported Food Security Act of 2007, which would mandate that foreign imports meet the same or better standards than those in the U.S. Today, I introduced legislation that would require country of origin labeling on processed foods. Consumers have a right to know where their food comes from. And while these are important steps to take, they surely aren't enough. Despite the real and the present danger from Chinese imports, we must not focus solely on import safety and consumer threats just from China. The real threat is a failed trade policy that allows recall after recall. The real threat is our failure to change course and craft a new trade policy. The real threat is this administration's insistence on more of the same, more trade pacts that send jobs overseas, more trade pacts that allow companies and countries to ignore the rules of fair trade, more trade pacts that will mean more tainted products in more homes and more recalls for our businesses. The administration and its free trade supporters in Congress are gearing up for another trade fight. They want to force on our nation, a nation that in November demanded change, force on our nation more job-killing trade agreements with unreliable standards. Free trade agreements with Colombia and South Korea, with Peru and with Panama are currently being debated in Congress, and they're all based, with some improvement, they're all based on the same failed trade model. It's time for a new direction. It's time for a trade policy that ensures the safety of food on our kitchen tables and toys in our children's bedrooms. It's time for a trade policy that creates new businesses and good-paying jobs at home. It's time for a trade policy that puts an end to the global exploitation of cheap labor. Everyone agrees on one thing: we want more trade, we want more of it. But as President Sherrod just said, cheap products have a very expensive price all too often. Most importantly, our trade policy should protect the safety of our children and the health of our families.